The galactic core was nothing like the empty space between stars. Here, reality itself seemed uncertain about what it wanted to be. Light moved in curves that defied physics. Time flowed at different speeds depending on which direction you faced. Space folded and twisted like fabric, caught in an invisible wind. The valiant dawn shook constantly as it pushed deeper into this region, where the normal rules of the universe barely applied. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching instruments struggle to make sense of their readings. Jake Morrison had stopped trying to explain what the sensors were detecting. Words like up and down lost meaning here. Distance became subjective. They were approaching something vast. Something that existed in dimensions humans could perceive only as shadows and echoes. The speakers were here, all around them, inside them, everywhere and nowhere at once. Sophia felt the calling reach its peak intensity. It was no longer a gentle presence. It was overwhelming, like standing next to a waterfall of consciousness. The speakers were examining every human simultaneously. Every thought humanity had ever had. Every emotion ever felt. Every choice ever made. The entire history of the species laid bare in an instant. There was no privacy. No secrets, no hiding. Everything was visible to beings that existed outside time and could see beginning and end as a single continuous moment. Then they appeared. Not in physical space, but in a way that human minds could barely process. The speakers manifested as a vast amphitheater of light surrounding a perfect image of Earth. Every continent, every ocean, every city. The planet hung there in impossible detail, and around it stood figures that hurt to look at directly. Beings of light and shadow that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their true forms were beyond human comprehension. What Marcus and his crew saw were projections, simplifications, shadows of something far greater. Marcus stepped forward. His crew stood behind him in a line. Elena on his right, Sophia on his left. Ryan, Jake, Greg, and Lisa behind them. 7 humans representing 8 billion. 7 voices speaking for an entire species. The weight of it threatened to crush him. But he stood straight, looked at the speakers directly despite the pain it caused, and waited. The speakers did not speak with words. Their voice was a concept that bloomed directly in consciousness. A question that needed no language. Does humanity deserve to continue? The question contained within it everything the speakers had learned about humans. All the wars, all the compassion, all the cruelty and kindness, all the destruction and creation, all the hatred and love, everything. The question was not about whether humans were good or bad. It was about whether they deserved a chance to become something more. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. What could he possibly say? How could words defend 8 billion years of evolution, thousands of years of civilization, all the beautiful and terrible things humans had done? He stood there silent for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then he made a choice. He decided to tell the truth, simple, direct, honest. He said no. Humanity did not deserve to continue. Not as they were. They were violent and selfish and short-sighted. They had nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. They fought wars over resources and religion and pride. They divided themselves by skin color and nationality and belief. They carried hatred in their hearts and fear in their minds. By any objective measure, humanity was dangerous, unstable, flawed beyond redemption. The speakers listened without judgment. Marcus felt Elena tense beside him. She had not expected him to condemn humanity. But he was not finished. He took a breath and continued. He said yes, humanity deserved to continue precisely because of those flaws, because their struggles with darkness had taught them to value light, because their history of division had shown them the importance of unity, because their capacity for destruction had revealed the preciousness of creation. Humanity did not deserve to continue because they were perfect. They deserved to continue because they never stopped trying to be better, even though they knew they would never fully succeed. He told the speakers about a human concept, the idea of aspiration. Humans knew they were flawed, knew they were broken, knew they fell short of their own ideals constantly, but they kept those ideals anyway. They kept believing in justice even when they committed injustice. They kept believing in peace even when they waged war. They kept believing in love even when they acted with hatred. That gap between what humans were and what they aspired to be was not weakness. It was their greatest strength. It meant they were always growing, always changing, Always becoming. Sophia stepped forward next. She spoke in mathematics, in pure logic and reason that transcended language. She showed the speakers something unique about human consciousness. Humans could hold contradictory truths simultaneously. They could feel hope and despair in the same moment. Love and fear. Courage and doubt. This quantum state of consciousness made them unpredictable, but also infinitely adaptable. Other species simplified themselves, chose one path, one way of being. Humans refused. They insisted on being everything at once, messy, complicated, contradictory, but alive in a way that pure consistency could never be. The speakers deliberated. Time seemed to stop, or maybe it flowed backward, or maybe it branched into multiple streams simultaneously. Reality was unstable here. Marcus felt himself existing in multiple moments at once. He saw possible futures. Earth empty like Praxis 9. Earth transformed into something beyond physical form. Earth continuing as it was, never knowing how close they came to extinction. All futures existed until the speakers chose which one would become real. Then the speaker spoke Earth's true name again. But this time the frequency was different. Not a summons to judgment, not a threat, a key, a transformation. Marcus felt something shift in his consciousness. Back on Earth, 8 billion humans felt the same shift simultaneously. The calling that had been building for months suddenly crystallized into something clear and beautiful and terrifying. Every human experienced transcendence at the same instant, but it was not like the transcendence of other species. The Zenthari had dissolved into collective consciousness. The Torvani had become beings of pure energy. Humanity's transformation was different. They remained individuals, kept their bodies, kept their emotions and thoughts and personalities, but they became connected at a fundamental level. They could feel each other. Not reading thoughts exactly. Something deeper. Feeling the essence of what it meant to be human, understanding each other not through words but through direct experience. Elena gasped as the transformation hit her. She could suddenly perceive threads connecting every human consciousness. Delicate but unbreakable, she felt the fear and hope of people on Earth, the joy and terror, the doubt and determination, all of it at once. And she understood. The speakers had not judged humanity as individuals. They had judged humanity as a collective, and found that collective worthy not despite its contradictions but because of them. The speakers revealed Earth's true name in its complete form. Terra Paradoxa, the world of contradictions. They explained that humans were the first species whose fundamental nature was paradox itself. Other species were defined by what they were. Humans were defined by what they struggled to reconcile within themselves. This made them unique, precious, necessary. The universe itself was approaching a transition point. The old order of ancient civilizations with their perfect unity and timeless wisdom was giving way to something new. Something chaotic and creative and unpredictable. Humanity would be the bridge between old and new. Lisa Chen, back in the command center on Earth, suddenly understood something profound. The judgment had never been about whether humanity would be destroyed. It had been about whether they were ready for the role they would play in the universe's future. The speakers needed a species that embodied contradiction, that could hold opposing truths simultaneously, that could be both ancient and young, wise and foolish, unified and diverse. Only humans fit that description. They had been chosen not in spite of their flaws, but because their flaws were exactly what the universe needed. Nathan Pierce felt tears running down his face. He could not remember the last time he cried. Maybe as a child, but now he wept openly. He felt the collective consciousness of humanity, felt their fear transforming into courage, their doubt transforming into determination, their division transforming into unity that preserved individuality. Humans were still themselves, still argued and disagreed and competed, but now they did so with understanding, with empathy, with the knowledge that beneath all differences they were fundamentally connected. The valiant dawn turned back toward Earth. Marcus looked at his crew. They had changed but remained themselves. Sophia still analyzed everything. Ryan still calculated risks. Jake still wondered at the mysteries of the universe. Elena still carried the weight of responsibility. Greg and Lisa still represented common humanity with all its hopes and fears. They were the same people, but now they could perceive the threads connecting them, could feel how their individual strengths complemented each other, how their differences made them stronger together than any of them could be alone. When they arrived back at Earth, the planet had changed. Not physically. The cities and oceans and mountains looked the same. Boo! The calling began exactly 3 months before Judgment Day. People all over Earth started hearing it at the same moment. Not a sound in their ears, but a presence in their minds. A feeling like someone was speaking just below the threshold of perception. Some people described it as music without melody. Others said it felt like being gently pulled toward something vast and incomprehensible. Sophia Blake was in her quarters aboard the Valiant Dawn when it started. She felt the presence bloom inside her consciousness like a flower opening. It was not frightening. It was almost comforting, like coming home after a long journey. But underneath that comfort was something else. A sense of being evaluated, examined, judged. The speakers were already here, in some way that transcended physical space. They were reading humanity's collective consciousness. The examination had begun. Jake Morrison studied the phenomenon from a scientific perspective. He discovered that the intensity of the calling varied from person to person. Those with higher levels of consciousness, more self-awareness, felt it more strongly. Children felt it less than adults. People in meditative states felt it overwhelming them. The calling was not uniform. It was proportional to individual awareness. The speakers were reaching into every human mind, measuring, weighing, understanding. On Earth, the response to the calling split humanity into factions. Some people embraced it with religious fervor. They held massive gatherings where thousands meditated together, trying to achieve collective consciousness. They believed the calling was divine, a test from God or gods. They thought if they proved their faith, they would be saved. Other people resisted the calling with every fiber of their being. They took drugs to dull their consciousness. They engaged in constant distraction, anything to avoid feeling that presence in their minds. They believed the calling was an invasion, a violation, an attack that must be fought. Dr. Helen Voss appeared on global broadcasts again. She explained that both reactions were understandable, but possibly wrong. The calling was not something to accept blindly or reject completely. It was something to engage with honestly. The speakers wanted to understand humanity. Fighting them or worshiping them were both forms of dishonesty. The right response was to simply be human. Feel what you feel. Think what you think. Let the speakers see the truth of human nature. Nathan Pierce struggled with the calling more than most. He was a military man. His entire life had been about control, about plans and strategies and preparedness. The calling made him feel powerless, exposed, vulnerable. He hated it. But Lisa Chen helped him understand that vulnerability was not weakness. That being seen completely, even the parts you wanted to hide, was a form of courage. Nathan slowly learned to stop fighting the calling, to let it wash over him, to be judged as he actually was rather than as he wished to be. Sophia made another breakthrough in the ancient archives. She found records of a civilization called the Torvani. They had faced judgment 500,000 years ago and passed. But their success came with a revelation that changed everything Sophia thought she knew. The Torvani had not achieved unity through agreement. They achieved it through acceptance. Every Torvani acknowledged that they were part of something larger than themselves. They accepted that individual survival was less important than collective continuity. But crucially, they made this choice without losing their individuality. They remained diverse and different while simultaneously being unified in purpose. The key was trust. Perfect, absolute trust. Every Torvani trusted that if they let go of individual existence, their essence would continue in the collective. They trusted their fellow Torvani to carry forward what mattered about them. They trusted the universe itself to honor their choice. That trust allowed them to transcend without losing themselves. They became individuals within unity, rather than individuals subsumed by unity. Marcus read Sophia's report and felt something between hope and despair. Could humanity achieve that kind of trust? People who fought wars over religious differences, who killed each other over resources, who could not even agree on basic facts about reality. How could they possibly trust each other enough to let go of individual survival? It seemed impossible. But Marcus realized that humanity had done impossible things before. They had split the atom, walked on the moon, built machines that thought, maybe they could do this too. Elena Grant faced her most difficult moment yet. The coalition sent her one final message. They offered to help humanity avoid judgment completely. Advanced technology could fragment human consciousness permanently, make each human effectively isolated from the collective. The speakers would not be able to evaluate a species with no collective consciousness. Humanity would survive, but they would never be able to unite, never transcend, never become anything more than what they currently were. It was survival at the cost of all future potential. Elena wrestled with this decision for days. Part of her wanted to accept, to save humanity, even if it meant caging them forever. But another part knew that humans would never forgive themselves for taking the coward's way out. They would always wonder what they could have become if they had faced judgment with courage. She made her final decision. She would not tell Earth's leaders about this option. She would let humanity face their fate with full knowledge and free choice. Whatever happened, they would own it completely. The Xanthari elder visited Elena one last time. The ancient being seemed sad, though its crystalline form made emotions hard to read. It told Elena something that no Xanthari had ever admitted to a younger species. The Xanthari envied humanity. They had survived their judgment and gained immortality, but they had lost something precious in the process. They had lost the ability to truly disagree, to have genuine conflict, to grow through struggle. The Xanthari were wise but static, perfect but frozen. They could not evolve anymore, they could not change. They were eternally what they were. The elder said that humans had something the Xanthari had sacrificed, the capacity for real growth, for genuine change, for becoming something new. The Xanthari hoped humanity would find a way to pass judgment without losing that capacity, to achieve unity while preserving diversity, to transcend while remaining authentically themselves. If any species could do it, the elder believed it would be humans, because humans specialized in doing things that should be impossible. 2 weeks before Judgment Day, Marcus made his final decision. The valiant Dawn would travel to the galactic core. His crew would face the speakers directly. They would be humanity's voice. He chose his crew carefully. Ryan Foster for his tactical mind and hidden compassion. Sophia Blake for her wisdom and courage. Jake Morrison for his scientific understanding and philosophical depth. Greg Palmer and Lisa Hayes for their representation of common humanity. People who were not leaders or geniuses, just regular humans trying their best. Elena insisted on coming too. She said humanity's ambassador should be present at humanity's judgment. Marcus agreed. Together they would stand before cosmic entities and defend humanity's right to exist. They would show the speakers everything. The wars and the peace, the hatred and the love, the destruction and the creation, all of it. Without filters, without apology. This is what humans are. This is what they have done. This is what they hope to become. The calling grew stronger every day. It was no longer subtle. It filled every quiet moment. Even in sleep, humans felt it. The presence of something vast and ancient. Something that existed before stars formed and would exist after the last star died. The speakers were watching, waiting, preparing to manifest fully. In 2 weeks they would appear. In 2 weeks humanity would be judged. In 2 weeks everything would change. Lisa Chen organized a global effort to help people prepare psychologically, not for death, for transformation. She coordinated with governments, religions, scientists, artists. They created messages of hope broadcast on every channel. Reminders of human achievement, stories of courage and compassion, examples of people overcoming differences to work together. The goal was not to hide humanity's flaws. It was to give context, to show that despite everything wrong with humans, they kept trying, they kept striving, they kept believing they could be better. Nathan Pierce found unexpected peace as Judgment Day approached. He had spent his whole life preparing for threats he could fight. Now he faced something beyond fighting, something that required a different kind of strength, the strength to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be completely seen without armor or pretense. He realized this was perhaps the most difficult battle he had ever fought. Not against an enemy, but against his own fear of being truly known. Helen Voss gave one final broadcast before the valiant Dawn departed for the galactic core. She spoke simply and directly to every human watching. She said that whatever happened, humanity should be proud. Proud of reaching this point. Proud of surviving their own adolescence as a species. Proud of choosing to face judgment rather than hide. She said that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the choice to move forward despite fear, and humanity had shown tremendous courage. The valiant Dawn left Earth orbit on a cold morning in March. Marcus stood on the bridge watching his homeworld shrink behind them. Blue and white and beautiful. He thought about all the people down there, 8 billion individuals. The news leaked exactly as Marcus knew it would. Someone always talked. Someone always sent a message home. Within 2 weeks of their return to Coalition space, every government on Earth knew about the coming judgment. Within 3 weeks, every human knew. The response was predictable chaos. Commander Lisa Chen stood in the operations center of the Global Space Defense Network on Earth. Screens surrounded her showing news feeds from every major city on the planet. Riots in New York, prayer gatherings in Jerusalem, protests in Beijing, stock markets crashing, banks closing, people buying supplies as if they could somehow prepare for cosmic judgment by stocking canned food. Lisa wanted to laugh or cry or scream, maybe all three at once. Colonel Nathan Pierce entered the command center looking like he had not slept in days. He probably had not. Nathan was in charge of Earth's defense initiative, and right now there was nothing to defend against. You could not shoot cosmic entities with missiles. You could not build walls against beings that existed in multiple dimensions. All his training, all his weapons, all his strategies were useless. He told Lisa about Project Exodus, a plan to scatter small groups of humans across the galaxy in hidden colonies. If the speakers judged humanity and found them wanting, maybe some survivors in secret locations would be overlooked. Maybe a few thousand could survive to rebuild. Lisa listened and then quietly explained what Jake Morrison had discovered. The true name connected every human everywhere. Distance did not matter. Hidden locations did not matter. When judgment came, it would find every human simultaneously. There was no escape. No backup plan. No safety net. Nathan sat down heavily in a chair. He asked what they were supposed to do then. Just wait to die? Lisa said no. They were supposed to help people be ready. Help them understand what was coming. Help them choose how they wanted to face the end. If this was humanity's final exam, they should at least show up prepared. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Council of Eternal Silence reconvened. This time they invited more human representatives. Ambassador Elena Grant returned with Marcus, Sophia, Ryan, and Jake. The ancient being seemed more agitated than before. The Xanthari's crystalline structure flickered with unstable light. The Vorum's energy field sparked and crackled. Even the Kelthran, ancient and patient, seemed troubled. The Xanthari spoke first. It explained that the council had deliberated for 2 weeks about what to tell humanity. They had decided to share everything they knew about the speakers and the judgment process. The speakers were not gods, though they seemed like gods to lesser beings. They were entities that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They had been old when the universe was young. Their purpose was to maintain balance, to ensure that species which gained the power to affect reality itself did not use that power to cause harm. The Vorum added more information. It said that when a civilization reached a certain threshold of technological and psychic development, they became capable of shaping reality through collective will. Not magic, not supernatural power, just the natural result of billions of minds thinking and feeling in synchronization. A civilization at that level could accidentally destroy stars or create new forms of matter, or tear holes in space-time. The speakers judged whether a species had the wisdom to handle such power. Elena asked the question that had been bothering her since the beginning. What aspect of humanity would be judged? What criteria would the speakers use? The Kelthran answered in its grinding metal voice. Humanity would be judged on their fundamental nature, on their capacity for both creation and destruction, on their ability to feel love and hatred simultaneously, on whether they could find unity despite being inherently divided. The judgment would be harsh because humans were the most contradictory species ever to reach this threshold. Most species simplified themselves before reaching this point. They chose to be peaceful or warlike, logical or emotional, unified or individualistic. Humans refused to choose. They insisted on being everything at once. Marcus asked if the council considered that a strength or weakness. The Xanthari responded that they did not know. No species like humanity had ever been judged before. The outcome was genuinely uncertain. That uncertainty terrified the council because in 4 million years of observation, they had always been able to predict judgment outcomes with reasonable accuracy. But humanity was unpredictable, chaotic, impossible to model or forecast. They might pass spectacularly or fail catastrophically. There was no middle ground. Back on Earth, an unexpected voice entered the global conversation. Dr. Helen Voss was a quantum physicist who had spent 30 years studying consciousness and reality. She was 70 years old, had won 3 major scientific prizes, and had recently started teaching philosophy alongside physics. She appeared on every major news network with a message that sounded insane, but somehow made perfect sense. Helen said that humanity should stop trying to present a false image of themselves, stop pretending to be united when they were divided, stop claiming to be peaceful when they had violent instincts, stop acting wise when they regularly did stupid things. The speakers could read their entire history instantly, every thought, every action, every choice. Lying would not work. Pretending would not work. The only strategy was radical honesty. She proposed that humanity's answer should be a paradox. Show the speakers exactly what humans were. Show them the wars and the peace treaties that followed. Show them the hatred and the love that overcame it. Show them the environmental destruction and the desperate efforts to repair the damage. Show them the genocides and the people who risked their lives to stop them. Show them everything, the good and the bad and the ugly. Let the speakers judge humanity as they actually were, not as they wished to be. Nathan Pierce hated this idea at first. He wanted humanity to present its best face, show only the achievements, hide the failures. But Lisa Chen convinced him otherwise. She pointed out that the speakers had existed for billions of years. They had judged dozens of civilizations. They would see through any deception instantly. Honesty was not just morally right. It was strategically sound. It was the only approach that had any chance of working. Sophia Blake made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying the records of successful civilizations, the ones that passed their judgment. She found a pattern that nobody had noticed before. The successful species had not been the most peaceful or most advanced or most moral. They had been the most authentic. They faced their judgment without filters or pretense. They showed the speakers their true nature and defended it with complete conviction. They said, "This is who we are, this is what we value, and we believe our way of existing has worth even with all its flaws." But Sophia also found something else in the ancient records, something that made her blood run cold. The judgment was not just a test. It was an invitation. Species that passed did not just continue existing as they were. They transcended. They evolved into something beyond physical form. They joined the ancient civilizations that existed across multiple dimensions. But transcendence came with a price. Every individual had to choose simultaneously to let go of their individual existence while affirming their collective continuation. It required absolute trust, complete surrender, total unity of purpose. Marcus read Sophia's report and felt despair settle over him like a heavy blanket. Humanity could barely agree on anything. Getting 8 billion people to make the same choice at the same moment seemed impossible. Countries could not agree on trade policies. Religions could not agree on basic moral principles. Scientists argued about proven facts. How could humanity possibly achieve the unity required for transcendence? Elena Grant faced her own crisis. The coalition offered humanity a way out, a shameful, cowardly way out, but a way nonetheless. They could suppress all knowledge of the true name. Use technology to fragment human consciousness enough to fall below the threshold that triggered judgment. Humanity would survive, but they would never evolve. They would be safe but caged, limited but alive. She had to decide whether to even tell Earth's leaders about this option. She spent 3 days alone in her quarters thinking. Then she made her choice. She would not tell anyone about the coalition's offer. Humanity deserved the chance to face their judgment with dignity. They deserved the opportunity to transcend or fail on their own merits. Taking the easy way out would mean giving up on everything that made humans human: their struggle, their growth, their refusal to accept limitations. If humanity was going to die, They would die reaching for something greater, not cowering in a cage of their own making. The Zenthari elder requested a private meeting with Elena. Just the two of them. The ancient being told her something that it had never told any younger species before. 4 million years ago, the Zenthari faced their judgment. They passed by achieving perfect unity, but that unity came at a terrible cost. Every Zenthari gave up their individuality. They became one mind in many bodies. They gained wisdom and power and immortality, but they lost something precious. They lost the ability to disagree, to argue, to have different opinions and perspectives. They became perfect and hollow. The elder said it envied humanity, envied their chaos and contradiction and conflict. The Zenthari had survived, but humans were still truly alive in a way the Zenthari know low. Captain Marcus Webb made a decision that could end his career or save humanity. He decided not to wait for official permission from the Coalition or Earth Command. The Valiant Dawn set course for restricted space, following the origin point of the signal that spoke Earth's true name. Ambassador Elena Grant supported his choice. She knew that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing were not the same. Commander Ryan Foster, the tactical officer, was not happy about breaking Coalition law. He stood on the bridge with his arms crossed, watching the navigation display. They were heading into territory that had been marked forbidden for over 2 million years. Ships that entered this region usually did not come back. The few that did return carried crews who had gone insane. Ryan asked Marcus if he was sure about this. Marcus said no, he was not sure about anything anymore, but doing nothing felt worse than taking a risk. It took them 6 days to reach the coordinates. 6 days of traveling through space that felt wrong somehow. The stars looked too bright and too distant at the same time. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the ship's astrophysicist, reported strange readings. Space itself was bent here in ways that violated known physics. It was like reality had been folded and creased like paper. Jake said the laws of nature were more like suggestions in this region. Gravity did not quite work right. Time flowed at different speeds depending on where you were standing. Light moved in curves that should be impossible. They found the planet on the 7th day. It hung in space like a blue and green jewel, identical to Earth in almost every way, but something was terribly wrong with it. The cities were intact. Streetlights were on. Vehicles were parked in neat rows. Buildings stood tall and proud. But there was no movement, no signs of life. Not even bacteria registered on their scanners. The world was perfectly preserved but completely dead. Sophia Blake studied the data from orbit. She identified this world as Praxis 9, one of the 73 civilizations that had been judged by the speakers. According to ancient records, the Praxians had been a peaceful species. They loved art and music and philosophy. They had never waged war, never harmed their environment, never created weapons of mass destruction. They were by all accounts a good and kind people. Yet they had failed their judgment. That fact terrified Sophia more than anything else. If beings that good could fail, what chance did humanity have? Marcus assembled a small team for surface exploration. Himself, Sophia, Ryan, and 2 security officers named Greg Palmer and Lisa Hayes. They took a shuttle down to the planet's largest city. The descent was smooth and quiet. Too quiet. Usually there would be atmospheric noise, wind, maybe birds. Here there was only silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you want to scream just to break it. They landed in what appeared to be a central plaza. The architecture was beautiful. Elegant curves and natural materials blended with advanced technology. Everything looked maintained and clean, but empty, so empty. Greg and Lisa checked their weapons nervously. Ryan scanned for threats. There was nothing. No danger, no movement. Nothing alive to threaten them. Somehow that made it worse. Sophia led them to a large building at the edge of the plaza. Her translation of ancient records indicated this was the main archive center. If the Praxians had left any explanation for what happened to them, it would be here. The doors opened automatically as they approached. The lights inside flickered on. The building's power system still worked perfectly after thousands of years of abandonment. That should have been impressive. Instead, it was deeply unsettling. The archives were massive. Row after row of data storage devices, both physical and holographic. Sophia connected her tablet to the main computer system. It took her 3 hours to break through the security protocols and access the final records. What she found made her hands shake. She called the others over to look at the display. The record showed that 42 days before their extinction, a Praxian scientist had discovered their world's true name in an archaeological dig. The name had been carved into a stone tablet that was over 50 million years old, older than the Praxians themselves. The scientist had spoken the name aloud while recording her findings. That was when the whispers began. At first, only a few Praxians heard the whispers. They described them as voices speaking in a language they could not understand but somehow knew the meaning of. The voices spoke of judgment, of worthiness, of a test that all advanced civilizations must face. The whispers spread. Within a week, every Praxian alive could hear them, in their dreams, in quiet moments. Even in the middle of conversations, the voices were always there, gentle but insistent. The Praxian leadership tried everything to stop the whispers. They tried to evacuate their people to other star systems. But the moment someone spoke their true name, they became bound to their homeworld. Distance meant nothing. A Praxian colonist on a planet hundreds of light years away heard the same whispers at the same time as someone standing on Praxis 9. They were all connected through their true name. They were all part of the same judgment. Marcus read through the final logs. The last entry was made by someone named Kellyan, who appeared to be a government official. Kellyan wrote that the speakers had finally manifested. They appeared as beings of light and shadow that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Looking at them directly caused physical pain. They did not speak with words. They spoke directly into minds. They asked the Praxians a single question. Did they deserve to continue existing? The Praxians had tried to answer with their achievements. They listed their art, their science, their philosophy. They explained how they had lived in peace for 10,000 years, how they had helped younger civilizations, how they had harmed no one. The speakers listened to everything. Then they delivered their judgment. The Praxians had lived good lives. They had created beauty. They had spread no suffering. But they had never truly been tested. They had never faced real hardship or made hard choices. They were kind because kindness was easy for them. The speakers needed to know if they would still choose goodness when it was difficult. But the Praxians had no answer to that question. They had never been forced to choose between good and survival. Kellyan's final words were simple and heartbreaking. He wrote that the speakers had found them wanting. Not evil, not cruel. Just incomplete. The Praxians had potential but had never realized it. They were children who never grew up. In 10 seconds, Kellyan wrote, every Praxian in the universe would cease to exist. He hoped that whoever found this record would learn from their mistake. He hoped they would understand that goodness without strength was not enough. That peace without having known war was not true peace. That kindness without the capacity for cruelty was not real virtue. The log ended. Sophia stared at the screen with tears in her eyes. Ryan looked sick. Greg and Lisa stood in shocked silence. Marcus felt a weight settle on his chest. Humanity had known war. Humanity had faced hardship. Humanity had made terrible choices and carried the guilt of those choices. Did that mean they had a chance? Or did it mean they would fail for different reasons? Jake Morrison's voice crackled over their communication devices. He had been analyzing the planet from orbit while they explored the archives. He had discovered something important about true names. They were not just words. They were frequencies, vibrations that connected a species' collective consciousness to their homeworld. Every thought, every emotion, every memory of every member of a species created a quantum entanglement with their planet. The true name was the key that unlocked that connection. When the speaker spoke a true name, they could read the entire history and nature of a species instantly. Marcus ordered everyone back to the shuttle. They had learned what they needed to learn. As they lifted off from Praxis 9, he looked down at the dead world below. The buildings, the empty streets, the silence. This could be Earth in 4 months. This could be humanity's legacy. Empty cities and a final message warning others not to make the same mistakes. But as the shuttle climbed toward orbit, Sophia said something that gave him a sliver of hope. She had found other records in the archives. Records of civilizations that had passed their judgment. The successful ones had not been perfect. They had not been peaceful or kind or wise. They had been something else. They had been authentic. They had faced their judgment with complete honesty about who and what they were. They did not hide their flaws or pretend to be better than they were. They stood before the speakers and said, "This is us in all our broken glory. and we choose to keep trying anyway. Marcus thought about humanity. Violent and peaceful, cruel and kind, selfish and selfless, brilliant and stupid. Humanity was a contradiction. They fought wars and wrote poetry. They destroyed environments and then worked desperately to save them. They were capable of both genocide and extraordinary acts of compassion. Maybe that was the key. Maybe humanity's strength was not in being good or bad, but in being genuinely, messily, complicated human. Maybe the speakers needed to see species that struggled with morality rather than species that had solved it. Back aboard the Valiant Dawn, Marcus called a meeting of his senior staff. He told them everything they had learned. Then he made another decision. They were not going back to Coalition space immediately. First, they were going to Vis. The stars looked different through the observation window of the Valiant Dawn. Captain Marcus Webb stood there every morning at exactly 600 hours, watching the endless darkness between galaxies. He had been doing this for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Coalition. The view never got old. Space was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Lieutenant Sophia Blake walked into the observation deck, carrying her digital tablet. She looked tired. Her eyes had dark circles under them and her hands were shaking slightly. Marcus noticed immediately. Sophia was usually calm and collected, even when dealing with the most difficult alien languages. Something was wrong. She approached him without saying hello. That was unusual too. Sophia always said hello. She handed him the tablet without a word. On the screen was a waveform pattern, something that looked like audio data but far more complex. The pattern repeated itself every 7 seconds. Marcus had seen thousands of signal patterns during his career in space, but this one made his stomach turn. There was something deeply wrong about it. She finally spoke. Her voice was quiet and strained. She told him she had picked up this signal 3 days ago during a routine deep space scan. At first she thought it was just background noise from the galactic core. But then her translation software tried to process it. The software crashed. Not just once. Every single time she tried to analyze the signal, the system crashed. So she tried older translation programs. They crashed too. Then she tried manual translation using ancient linguistic databases. That was when the nightmares started. Marcus asked her what kind of nightmares. Sophia looked away from him, staring out at the stars. She said she dreamed of empty worlds, planets with cities still standing, lights still on, machines still running, but no people. No animals, no plants, nothing alive, just silence, perfect absolute silence. In the dreams, she walked through these empty cities calling out for anyone. Her voice echoed back at her from dead buildings. She felt like she was the last living thing in the universe. Marcus took the tablet from her hands. He told her to get some rest and that he would handle this. But Sophia grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She looked directly into his eyes and said there was something else. The signal was not random. It was a word. A single word in a language older than any civilization they knew about. She had finally managed to translate it using a fragment of text from an archaeological site the Coalition had marked as forbidden. The word was a name. Earth's name. Not Earth as humans called it. The true name. The name that reality itself used for their world. Marcus felt cold suddenly. The observation deck temperature was always maintained at exactly 21 degrees, but he felt ice running through his veins. He asked Sophia if she had reported this to anyone else. She shook her head. Something in her gut told her to bring it to him first. Before the Coalition, before Earth Command, before anyone, he made a decision right there. He told her they needed to inform Ambassador Elena Grant immediately. Elena was humanity's voice in the Coalition. If anyone would know how to handle this, it was her. Sophia agreed. They left the observation deck together and headed toward the diplomatic quarters. Within an hour, they were sitting in Elena's private office. The ambassador listened to everything without interrupting. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Sophia finished explaining, Elena sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. She stayed like that for almost a minute. Marcus and Sophia waited. They knew better than to rush her. Elena was thinking, processing, calculating. Finally, Elena opened her eyes. She told them this was worse than they could possibly imagine. She had heard whispers about something called true names during her diplomatic work. The elder races, the civilizations that had been around for millions of years, never spoke about it openly, but sometimes late at night during private dinners they would mention it, always in hushed tones, always with fear in their voices or whatever passed for voices among their species. Elena reached for her secure communication device. She sent an encrypted message to someone. She would not tell them who. Within minutes she received a response. She read it and her face went pale. The message was an official summons. Elena Grant was to appear before something called the Council of Eternal Silence. Immediately. And she was permitted to bring 2 human witnesses. Marcus and Sophia realized they were those witnesses. The council met in a location that was not on any star map. The coordinates Elena received led them to a region of space that appeared completely empty. But when the Valiant Dawn arrived and activated a special beacon, reality seemed to fold in on itself. A massive structure appeared, hidden behind some kind of dimensional curtain. It was larger than Earth's moon and looked like it had been built before stars existed. The architecture was impossible, following geometric rules that hurt to look at. They docked with the structure and were met by guides who did not speak. These beings were humanoid but made of something that looked like living crystal. They escorted the 3 humans through corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Marcus kept his eyes forward and focused on breathing. The place felt ancient and powerful. It felt like walking through the heart of a sleeping god. The council chamber was a vast sphere. At the center floated 3 entities. The first was a Zenthari, a being made entirely of crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light. The second was a Vorum, a creature of pure energy contained within a field that bent space around it. The third was a Kelthran, a machine intelligence so old that parts of it had become organic through sheer age. The Zenthari spoke first. Its voice was like music played on glass instruments. It said that humanity had been detected by something ancient, something that lived in the spaces between dimensions, something that judged civilizations. The signal Sophia had discovered was Earth's true name being spoken by entities called the Speakers. These beings existed outside normal reality. They appeared when a civilization reached a certain level of development. When a species became capable of affecting the fabric of reality itself. When that happened, the Speakers came to judge whether that species should be allowed to continue existing. Marcus felt his legs go weak. He asked what happened to civilizations that failed the judgment. The Vorum answered. Its voice was like thunder echoing inside their minds. It told them that 73 civilizations had been judged throughout galactic history. 21 had passed. 52 had failed. The ones that failed did not die in war or disaster. They simply ceased to exist. Every member of their species everywhere in the universe vanished in the same instant. Their worlds remained. Their cities remained. Their technology remained. But the people were gone, erased from reality as if they had never been. Sophia spoke up. Her voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. She asked how long humanity had. The Kelthran responded in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Based on the signal patterns, humanity had approximately 4 months before the Speakers manifested in their dimension. 4 months to prepare for judgment. 4 months to prove they deserved to exist. Elena asked the question that Marcus was thinking. What were the criteria for judgment? How did a civilization pass? The 3 ancient beings looked at each other. The Zenthari spoke again. It said that every species was judged differently. The Speakers looked at the fundamental nature of a species, what they valued, how they treated each other and other life forms, whether they had wisdom to match their power. The Zenthari had survived by achieving perfect unity. Every member of their species thought and acted as one. But humanity was not like the Zenthari. Humanity would be judged by different standards, standards that the council could not predict. The meeting ended with a warning. The council told them not to try to run. Every civilization that attempted to flee had been judged more harshly. The Speakers could reach across any distance into any dimension. There was nowhere to hide from judgment. The only choice was to face it with courage or face it with fear. The outcome would be determined by who humanity truly was at their core. Not who they pretended to be. Not who they wished to be. Who they actually were. As they walked back to their ship, Marcus looked at Sophia and Elena. Both women looked shaken but determined. He realized that in 4 months everything would change. Either humanity would prove itself worthy and transcend to something greater, or they would join the 52 civilizations that had been erased from existence. There was no middle ground, no second chances, no time to waste. The clock was counting down to Judgment Day, and Earth did not even know it yet.